Hi, welcome to our financial report video. The company that we chose to do it's Sabeco. It's an alcohol and beverage company in Saigon. We are Group 3 and these are our members. Our names and student ID will be included in the slides that we will present on. In this presentation, we will mention 4 parts. Industry analysis, business and financial analysis, and finally, conclusion and recommendations. Sabeco is a beer company, so we will start to take a look into the beer industry in Vietnam. So Vietnam is ranked number 9 in the top global beer consumption, and with a wide range of companies in the market, this makes Vietnamese market a very competitive for the beer industry. Still, there are rooms for the industry to grow due to the growing working age in Vietnam, or what we call the golden population structure. And Vietnamese people love to drink as well. We have a very strong drinking culture. Plus, with the World Cup happening, the beer consumption will increase dramatically. So, with this aspect, we can say that companies still have plenty opportunity to grow. Now I will briefly talk about Sabeco. Sabeco was founded in 1977. Its products were and now still an iconic in the Vietnamese beer products. With over 8 product lines, they aim to suit every desire from the consumer, and they have become one of the best well-known beer products in Vietnamese market. The company was officially issued stock at Ho Chi Minh Stock Exchange on December 6, 2016, after the state divested the Sabeco on December 18, 2017. Vietnam Beverage Company Limited becomes the biggest stakeholder of Sabeco, controlling 53.6% of the shares. Uh, State Capital Investment Corporation is the second biggest with 36% of the shares. Foreign shareholders hold 8.9% and the rest is domestic shareholders. Sabeco has 44 subsidiaries and affiliates, uh, including 22 factories and 10 regional trade firms. In this report analysis, we will use Habeco, a beer and beverage company based in Hanoi, to compare with Sabeco because Sabeco have the most influence in the south of Vietnam and Habeco have the most influence in the north of Vietnam. So we will compare them together to help you guys to have a more detailed picture of the cash flow condition and the financial health of Sabeco. And we will move on to the financial analysis.
Moving on will be the financial analysis presented by Mei Hoon Thảo. From 2019 to 2020, Sabeco's total assets of December 31, 2020 were 27,374 billion Vietnam dong, a slight increase from 26,962 billion Vietnam dong the previous year. Specifically, short-term assets increased slightly by 348 billion Vietnam dong, mainly due to an increase in time deposits, while cash equivalents, and inventories decreased. Inventory calculated at the end of 2019 is higher due to the preparation of goods for that holiday in January 2020, while this year that holiday falls in February 2021, as well as inventory management more effective. Moreover, long-term fixed assets decreased by 90 billion Vietnam dong due to depreciation, although the value of fixed assets from 2020 to 2021, by the end of 2021, Sabeco's total assets have grown by 11.37%, reaching 30,487 billion Vietnam dong. In the 3 years from 2019 to 2021, all the short and long-term assets remained stable. Short-term assets increased by 17.2% over the same period, mainly due to an increase in accounts cash equivalents, time deposits, and inventory. Long-term assets decreased by 3.2% over the same period, mainly due to the divestment of OCB and DIG, and profits from investment from joint ventures and associates decreased. The company's total liabilities were 6,886 billion Vietnam dong as of December 31, 2019, after dropping significantly by about 10.55%. Sabeco recovered by 28.13% to reach 7,892 billion Vietnam dong at the end of 2021. Total liabilities comprise both current and long-term liabilities, with current liabilities accounting for the vast majority. However, the current liabilities fluctuated throughout a 3-year period. The long-term liabilities also fluctuated during the period. It started at 798 billion Vietnam dong in 2019 and hit the lowest point of 634 billion Vietnam dong in 2021. Liabilities were 7,892 billion Vietnam dong, up 28.1% over the same period, mainly from dividend payable. In 2021, payables for packaging and expansions projects up Saigon Quảng Ngãi and increased marketing and sales support costs. According to the data, it is clear that while most of the figures of Sabeco grows from 2019 to 2021, those figures of Habeco decline. The assets of Sabeco grows gradually from 26.9 trillion Vietnam dong to almost 30.5 trillion Vietnam dong, a 11.5% growth in assets, while assets of Habeco decreased constantly, down 8.81%. In addition, Sabeco spent much more on total assets and stockholders' equity than Habeco between 2019 and 2021.
Move on to the income statement. First out, we'll have three parts to cover, which is net revenue, cost of goods sold, and net income. So net revenue is important in report analysis because it shows a company financial stability. Over the 3 years period, Sabeco revenue had reduced significantly uh, by 30.4%, from almost 38 trillion Vietnam dong to 26.3 trillion dong. This significant reduce more than 10 trillion was the result of the COVID-19, and this decline in net revenue also affected other ratios of the company that will be presented later by my other members. During 2019 and 2020, when the COVID-19 began and spread most widely, Sabeco has reduced the cost of input material, which are mainly malt and hops, the ingredient to create beers, as much as possible. Uh, and this result in the huge drop in cost of goods sold from 28.3 trillion down to 19.4 trillion, and continue to reduce to the next year 2021 to 18.7 trillion dong. Net income is another important part of any financial analysis because it shows the company's profit for the period when taking into account of all aspects of the business. Net income uh, of Sabeco decreased a huge 73% in just 2 years since 2019. Furthermore, net revenue in 2021, as I mentioned previously, was the lowest uh, in the past 3 years, and due to the high cost of goods sold, 18.7 trillion dong, the company gross profit was at its lowest, and the Sabeco entire net income in 2021 was significantly impacted by the tax burden. They have to pay the tax of 927 billion Vietnam dong.
I will continue to disrupt our ratio analysis. The first one is the liquidity ratio. Now we saw the first chart in this chart. So the company current ratio, quick ratio, and cash ratio. The bar graph shows that the current ratio of Sabeco started at 3.15 times in 2019 and then increased by 0.62 times in 2020. After that, it declined to 3.15 in 2021. For 3 years, the ratio of the corporation was more than 1, showing that the company's liabilities were lower than its current assets. Therefore, Sabeco has sufficient assets to settle its debts. And as can be seen from the chart, the quick ratio of Sabeco increased sharply from 2.82 to 3.49 between 2019 and 2020. In 2021, it then decreased to 2.92 times in 2021. These ratios were greater than 1 from 2019 to 2021, demonstrating that Sabeco would be able to pay off its present debt with its liquid assets. The cash ratio of Sabeco companies witnesses a different change from the quick ratio, reducing from 0.68 times to 0.53 times from 2019 to 2020 and decreasing to 0.50 times in 2021 with cash and cash equivalents. The cash ratio reveals whether or not the company secures timely payment of short-term debts. Therefore, it is clear from the graph that all of Sabeco's numbers were over above 0.5, which shows that the firm will have no trouble repaying its loan.
Hello, my name is Tan, and in this part, I will discuss and quickly describe about financial leverage ratio, such as the debt ratio, the debt equity ratio, and the days sales in inventory. So, what's the financial leverage ratio? It's a type of financial ratio that measures a company's level of debt relative to another financial metric, thereby assessing the enterprise financial risk of default. And let's begin with the debt ratio. The total to debt ratios is defined as the proportion of debt to total assets, with the proportion acting as the unit of measurement. The firm had generally maintained a debt to total asset ratio of less than zero point 0.4 throughout the years, indicating that the financial condition is excellent and less dangerous. In 2020, the debt to total asset ratio decreased slightly to 0.23. Throughout the year, it had remained relatively constant at 0.26. Next, the debt equity ratio, the underlined. The debt equity ratio assesses the company's ability to use and effectively management debt. It offers an overview of the company's financial health, structure, and financing source. In general, Sabeco debt equity ratios is similar to the total debt ratio, when it slightly decreased in 2020 from 0.34 to 0.29. However, the debt equity ratio grew to 0.35 a safe level for the company's financial health. In summary, Sabico total assets and equity have steadily increased over the years. However, both the debt ratio and debt equity fell slightly in 2020s. Total liabilities fell by 726 billion Vietnam dong over the same periods. This is primarily due to the difference in trade payable recognition periods as well as the decrease in payable to associates. In this slide, I will talk about the days sales inventory ratio, which is relevant to the financial leverage ratio. So, what are the days sales in inventory? Days sales in inventory are the financial measurement demonstrating how long it takes enterprise to convert the inventories of work in progress item into sale. It is evident that Sabico days sales in inventory from 2019 to 2021 is sustainably lower than that of Habico, indicating that Sabico has superior sales ability and more influence on consumer choice. During the COVID-19 pandemic, all consumption channels were paralyzed, especially the F&B industry, where the peak consumption is highest, so both Sabeco and Habeco's were affected massively. Both big company inventory have risen as a result of government restriction on mass gathering and social distancing. Furthermore, because consumers are becoming more conscious about their health, they are opting for healthier non-alcoholic beverage options. The factor may cause a shift in the competitive relationship in the beer market. Typical days of sale in inventory increased significantly from 24.34 days to 32.02 days during 2019 to 2020, whereas hospital day sale inventory increased somewhat from 38.3 to 41.21 days. However, in 2021, Sabico and Habico days sale had decreased slightly to 30.29 and 39.94, respectively. This is a good point, since it had partially shown the resurgence of beer firm sales following a terrible era of the COVID-19 pandemic.
Greetings, my name is Nhi and I will discuss about the comparison of the debt EBITDA ratio and the access to equity ratio. When comparing the debt EBITDA ratio, we want the number to be low because it shows that the company is paying up debt and outgrowing their earning. Usually when a debt EBITDA ratio stays below 1, it's considered relatively safe. If the value exceeds 2 or higher, it means the company is increasing debt more than earning, so it's considered risky. In general, the debt-EBITDA ratio of Sabeco in 2020 is the lowest, 0.92, while the debt-EBITDA ratio in 2021 is the highest, 1.48. A declining debt-EBITDA ratio is better than increasing one because it implies the company is paying up its debt and outgrowing earnings. Likewise, an increasing debt-EBITDA ratio means the company is increasing debt more than earnings. The firm also stated that Sabeco regarded strength in the fourth quarter of 2021 following the southern province return to normal operation following a pause caused by COVID-19, which result in the company high revenue and profit being 110% and 197% higher than the third quarter of 2021 respectively. Telco total revenue in 2021 was 26.30 373 billion down, while its profit after tax was 3.929 billion down, achieving 94.3% and 79.6% increase over the performance in 2020 respectively. On the other hand, the debt-EBITDA ratio of Habico in 2020 is the lowest, 2.05, while the debt-EBITDA ratio in 2021 is the highest, 2.65. The 3-year 2019 to 2021 debt EBITDA ratio of Habico are all above 2, while Sabeco remains its ratio below 2. This means Habico is increasing debt more than earning than Sabeco, so it is considered more risky than Sabeco. In conclusion, Sabeco could be financially self-sufficient and did not need to borrow much as Habico, thus reducing financial pressure on the business, minimizing interest expenses and deferred payment, and improving business results. Next is the access to equity ratio. Review the proportion of an entity's assets that has been funded by shareholder. The inverse of this ratio shows the proportion of assets that have been funded with debt. The low the access to equity ratio, the less debt the company has and the less risky it is. A high equity to asset ratio means the company has more debt and is more risky. In general, the access to equity ratio of Sabeco in 2020 is the lowest 1.29, while the access to equity ratio in 2000 and 21 is the highest 1.35. A ratio under 2 means the company funds fewer assets by ensuring debt than by equity, which could be a less risky investment. In this case, a low ratio could be seen as more conservative. On the other hand, the asset to equity ratio of Habico in 2020 is the lowest 1.34, while the asset to equity ratio in 2019 is the highest 1.5. The firm also stated that Habico regained strength in 2021 following the sudden provide return to normal operations following a pause caused by COVID-19, which was a result of the company declining revenue, decreased from 1.5 in 2019 to 1.34 in 2020, and in 2021 increased from 1.34 to 1.5 after the isolations. In conclusion, Sabeco and Habeco are able to make its ratio under 2, meaning that the two companies fund fewer assets by ensuring debt than by equity, which could be a less risky investment. In this case, a lower ratio, Sabeco could be seen as more conservative than Habeco. After the comparison of two different ratio, the debt EBITDA ratio and the asset to equity, um, we have the conclusion that Habeco is considered more risky to make an investment than Sabeco.
Thank you, Nhi, for your part. My name is Doãn Trần Anh Khôi, and in the next part, we will focus on the profitability ratios. Profitability ratios are financial indicators that measure the assess a company's capacity to make a profit. I will cover the first two ratios, which are gross profit margin and net profit margin. Gross profit margin helps to measure how much profit a company generates from its sales of goods and services after deducting direct costs or the cost of goods sold. Net profit margin is a financial measure used to determine how much of a company's total sales is profit. So, according to Sabeco's financial report, the business showed the steady development when its gross profit margin grew from 0.25 times to 0.3 times from 2019 to 2020. Net profit margin in that period of time also had a slight decrease of 0.1, which is not significantly. However, during the COVID-19 outbreak from 2020 to 2021 had affected the majority of society, forcing the government to impose a total lockdown. This affected all industry, including Sabeco, resulting in decrease in both gross profit margin and net profit margin. So in this comparison with Habeco, Habeco's gross profit margin was higher than Sabeco's from 2019 to 2020 until 2021. Sabeco increased continuously to 0.29 times, while Habeco dropped it sharply to 0.06 times. Sabeco's decreased slightly from the 0.19 times to 0.15 times and Habeco's net profit margin fluctuated from 2019 to 2020, decreased slightly to 0.05 times.
So thank you, Corey. And to move on with our group introduction about habit Sabeco, I will show to you guys four particular parts: return on asset, return on equity, the comparison of Sabeco and Habeco when it comes to profitability. So first of all, I will briefly talk about the return on assets. So return on assets is a financial ratio that shows how lucrative the business is in comparison to its total assets. So when it comes to Sabeco, on May 5, 2021, it's had a breakout of the coronavirus and the strict social distancing rules in Ho Chi Minh City and the southern regions. That's the reason why Sabeco's return on asset have a sharp decrease from last year to 12.89% in 2021. Yeah, to move on. The secondly is about return on asset. So return on asset is referred to as the return on a net assets since the shareholder equity is determined by subjecting a company debt to its assets. So Sabeco return on assets from 2019 to 2020 was a slight decrease from 26.75 to 23.0 to 27%. Then by 2021, it dropped sharply to last year to 17.39%. So when compared to Sabeco percentage dropped sharply uh, 7.03% for 3 years, and Habico also fluctuated, went from 2019 to 2020 when it increased slightly from 6.73% after 1 year. It dropped sharply, and when it comes to return on asset, Asabico return on asset dropped sharply from 26.75% to 17.39%. Habico return on asset also increased slightly until 2021. It dropped sharply to 6.7% compared to last year. And in general, the profitability ratio of Sabeco figures are higher than Habeco during 3 years, and this shows that Sabeco is well positioned to pay its fixed, expand, and debt commitments, deal with economic close down, and provide cheaper pricing at a lower margin than Habeco. Furthermore, Sabeco management use this to boost profitability by controlling expenses.
I will continue again to show you about the market value ratios, which is abbreviated EPS. EPS is generally considered the most important factor in determining share price and firm value. It indicates the amount of money a company earns for each share of its stocks. Sabeco's earning per share dropped from 8,374 Vietnam dong per share to 7,698 Vietnam dong per share in 2020. The price per share will then fall significantly to 6,127 Vietnam dong per share between 2020 and 2021. After 3 years, it is clear that the price of Cyberco on the stock market fell from 228,000 Vietnam dong to 151,000 Vietnam dong in 2019 and 2022, and the net income decreased to over 27% of revenue, which mostly caused the APS to decrease to 6,127 per Vietnam dong per share in 2021. In general, the economy in Ho Chi Minh City is stronger than that in Hanoi. Sabeco's EPS is often greater than of Habeco. Sabeco's EPS has consistently declined for 3 years, whilst Habeco's has varied from 2019 to 2020 before the big drop.
And now we will move to conclusions parts. Yeah, and in inclusion parts, so Sabeco provides a wide range of techniques for the economic analysis of Sabeco and the underlying significance of the data. In 2021, Sabeco recorded a gross profit margin of the beer segment of over 33%, down too slightly from the previous year despite a sharp increase in raw material price. Bảo Securities predict this will help improve the gross profit margin in the next year compared to the last quarter of this year. Yeah, and that is end of our presentation. Thank you for listening.